Hi, it's Phil here with Chaska Area Fishing with Friends. I'm here to do a little video to introduce you to all the different components in your Fishing Academy to Go kit. I'm in a small retention pond in Chaska where I like to go for some easy fishing. There's lots of sunfish, which are just fun to catch and release. This isn't going to go in depth into too much detail. I want to just familiarize you with all the different components you have to allow you to feel comfortable to get out and practice fishing. When you end up with more questions, there's a world of resources out there. So this is just a stepping stone to get you started in your world of fishing. So good luck, and here we go. So here I have a tackle box in front of me. That's like the kit that you have. We're going to open this up and we're going to look over the different components in there. We're going to tell you what they are, and then we're going to go into a little more detail as to how you can use them. So here we have all the components laid out, and here we have hooks, split shot sinkers or weights, weighted jig heads, soft plastics or twister tails in this case, snap swivels, and last but not least, we have bobbers or floats. So here we are back at the water. I'm going to tie the hook directly to the line. I'm not going to go slow enough to show you exactly how to do this, since we have another video showing how to tie an improved clinch knot, which is what I'm tying here. Notice the number of wraps I make on here, and there's a few different directions you need to go with the end of the line. So watch the other video, which is a little closer up and a little slower, so you can see how to do it. You can see how even adult hands can sometimes struggle getting things tied the way you want it. Once you get the knot snugged up, then you still have this little bit of line at the end that we need to trim off. And the easiest thing to use for that is a nail clippers. So I always have a nail clipper with me when I'm out fishing. And then once you trim off that extra piece of line, make sure that you set it aside to throw away later. Don't throw it in the lake or leave it on the lake shore. I'm going to bait it with a red wiggler, which is a smaller type of earthworm, and it's pretty easy to find at most bait shops and has good luck, especially with sunfish, which I'm trying to catch today. Alright, and you can see my worm on the hook here. Just going to cast it out and see what happens. Well, that sure didn't go very far. Let's try that again. Notice I got some weeds on there. It's important that if you get weeds to clean it off. So I'm going to pull that back in. Just going to clean off these weeds. We're going to try casting again. Boy, that barely went further. But, oh geez, must be in a good spot. Here you go. Fishing can be that simple. So we had the worm. I was able to cast a little ways out, but it was really only about 4 or 5 feet from shore. Generally when we're fishing we want to go a little bit further. So what I have here is another component from your kit. It's called a weight or a sinker split shot. So it's fairly heavy compared to its size. So we go about a foot or so above the hook. And then there's this opening on here that we slide the line into, and then we pinch it shut. If you have an adult with you, they might be able to get it a little bit tighter, or if you use the pliers, you can get it on there. So with that, we're going to try this again. You can see I have the worm there, and there's the split shot higher up. So with that extra weight, I'm going to see if we can get this a little bit farther from shore. You can see that made a huge difference as to how far we were able to get from shore. I'm going to start reeling it in, and as I do, I can feel that that hook is dragging on the bottom. So while the weight helps us get it farther from shore, it also sinks to the bottom a lot faster. And at this point, I'm just dragging in weeds. So we do have another component as part of your kit
that might be helpful in that scenario.
So here we have our hook with a worm on it, and a little up the line, about a foot or so, we have our split shot sinker. And we found that that helped us get our bait a lot further from shore, but also found that unless we reel it in really fast, that's going to sink to the bottom and drag around in the weeds. So in order to keep our hook off of the bottom and in a spot where the fish are more likely to bite on it, we're going to add our float, or our bobber. This has a little orange sheath on the bottom that if you pull it down, it's spring-loaded, it reveals a wire hook. And we're going to take our line and just slide it in the inside of that little hook and release the sheath so it closes tight on our line. That's going to set the depth that our hook's going to sit at and hopefully be a better presentation for the fish.
Alright, so now we have our hook with a worm. We have our split shot sinker. And now we have a bobber. Now we're going to cast this out and see if this helps our fishing situation at all. Yeah, that's pretty good. So now we have our bobber out there. We know it's sitting there with a hook and a worm on it. Now we watch for a bite. If a fish bites, it pulls on the hook and then it starts pulling the bobber underwater. So a lot of times if you're fishing with a bobber, you can spend a lot of time just sitting and watching and nothing will happen. See how it's bouncing like that? Oh, there's a fish on there. When it goes under like that, then you need to give it a little tug called and set the hook. So now I'm going to reel this in. It swam off to the side. But hey, there's a fish. So now I want to show you something important about how you have the bobber set. Here we have our hook with our worm, our split shot sinker, and then way above that is our bobber. So I'm going to cast that out there and see how useful it is to us at this setting. You notice how the bobber's just laying on its side there? That means our hook and our weight are just sitting on the bottom. So it's like don't even have a bobber on at all. It's not really useful. So if your bobber's lying like that, then you know to move it a little bit further down the line and closer to your hook.
Here we have a weighted jig head, and oftentimes when you get these new, the paint will have filled in the eye where you need to tie it on. So the easiest thing to do is use another hook to get that paint loose. But keep in mind, if you use one of your hooks to get that paint out, you can be dulling that hook. So you don't want to use one of your favorite lures for that and keep it to a side. They also have special tools that you can use to try and get that paint out. But I'm just going to use a basic fish hook here because I have it on hand and don't need a special tool to do it. There, I got the paint out, so now I'm going to tie it on. Here the jig head is tied on, and I'm going to show you how to use a soft bait. It's a plastic with a twister tail version. It's a pretty common style. They come in a lot of different colors. Kobe has a video up where he talks a little bit more in detail about them. But you thread the point of the hook through most of the body and come out the other side, keeping the tail of your twister in the same direction as your hook. And here I'm just going to show you what it looks like when that twister tail is pulled through the water. So there's a lot of movement in that tail, and that's what we're trying to accomplish when we cast it out and retrieve it.
Okay, so here we have our jig head and one of our soft twister tail baits in there. And I've shown you how it moves around in the water. And the important thing about this, I'm not fishing it with a bobber. So it means once I cast it out, I need to continue to reel in. There it landed. I'm reeling in. Oh, there, I just pulled it right out of a fish's mouth.
That's as simple as it can be with these soft plastics. You cast it out and retrieve it, change where you're casting it to and the speed that you're reeling it in, and keep going until you catch some fish. So here's one last component that comes in your little tackle kit. It's called a snap swivel. So it has a snap on one end and a swivel on the other end. And it's useful when you want to be able to quickly change lures on your line. That's where the snap comes into play. But having the swivel on the other end keeps your line from getting twisted up. So I'm going to tie this on real quick, and then we'll give you a little demonstration on how to use it. Here we have it tied on, and we're going to open up the snap portion by pressing against that wire and pulling it out. And now we can easily take, for example, our jig head here, slide it through that snap, and then make sure to close it and test that it's on there tight. And that's what's really convenient about having these snap swivels, is you can quickly change from one bait to another. You can try a different color, a different size, or a completely different type of lure altogether. So here we have a different color, different shades to try. Just snap it on and you're good to go.
Here we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of casting. With this reel that came with your kit, if you press the button, it holds it in place. Then when you release it, the line is free to go out. So I have a weight tied on to the end of the line there that you can see hanging there. You can see that when I press the button and hold it, that weight stays in place. But when I let go, it'll drop. So that's important to remember before you start casting. So I'd encourage you to just do that several times and get the feel of how that button affects what's on the end of your line. So when I go over here to do basic casting, we're gonna bring our hook or our weight over the head here, hit the button, hold it, bring it forward, and let it go. Now, if you let it go too soon, you can end up just dropping your weight or hook behind you, or if you let it go when your rod tip's right up here, you could end up going straight up. And if you let it go when the rod is too far forward, then you can end up going right into the water, into the ground. So when we let go, we want the rod somewhere in this position, because that means it's going up, out, and forward. So again, we're going to bring it back, hit our button, bring it forward, and let it go. So that one I waited a little bit too long, and I cast it basically right into the ground. But that's the basics of casting. I encourage you to practice with a little weight. One or two of your split shot sinkers will work well to cast on a nice grassy area. And when you get comfortable with that, then adding your hook in and trying it at the lake is a good idea. Now, one last thing to talk about with our reel here is this dial on the top. There's a minus sign over here and a plus sign over here. And this is to set what's called the drag. Now, the drag is the amount of tension needed on the line to pull it up, even when it's locked into place. So you hear that clicking noise? I'm able to pull this right out of the reel. And that's because I have my drag setting really low. So I'm going to reel some of that slack back in. And now I'm going to turn towards the plus sign. And now I can still pull it out, but I'm requiring even more tension. Now what the drag is for is to allow the line to go out when you have a larger fish on, so they can surge with a little bit of force And if you have the drag too tight and your line has some weak spots or it's a little bit lighter for the fish that's on, they can snap the line right away. So with having the drag set to allow some of that line out, when the fish make a run, they can pull some of that line instead of snapping it. Now, one thing that'll happen is even with small fish, if you have this drag set very low, you can be trying to reel in even a small sunny, and you hear your reel making that sound. When you're turning like that, you're not pulling the line in, but you're just twisting it up because your reel components are twisting in here, but that grinding noise means that the line isn't pulling in. So then you just need to adjust your drag upwards a little bit, and then you can maybe pull it in a little bit more. So I would recommend for starters, especially if you're just going for smaller fish like sunfish or even the bass in some of the smaller local areas, you can have your drag set fairly high, because these reels come with a 10-pound test weight. So in that situation, it's probably better to have this a little on the higher side, so when you're pulling in those small fish, you're able to crank them in without getting that grinding noise that we were hitting there.
Thanks for watching the video. I hope it leaves you feeling comfortable and confident in how to use all the different components of your kit, and we wish you the best of luck in your next fishing adventure.